During my time in the hobby, I have had a fair few armies that go beyond your standard battle force, start collecting books, or even your old battalion or battle forces. But what we're looking at today is one of the armies that is more recent and one of my fun project armies. Though I will admit it has some slight pain in regards to the time it takes and the budget needed. And this is my Necrork army, an orc clan that has gained the ability to loot and utilize Necron technology. I will be going over a bit later around the lore of the army, for lack of a better word, which helped to give me the narrative direction for building and painting up these models. And we will touch on that, as I said, a little bit later on. But first off, let's start by looking at the trial models that kind of started it all off, and that is my Gretchin. Yes, the trial models are a group of Gretchin, and I generally quite like the Gretchin kit normally, but I am also partial to a small goblin or hobbit style miniature. The intention of this army was to make sure that every single model had some small conversion or a spread of Necron parts across them. Here we're mainly looking at things like the weapon amendments that we made to the model, but we also threw a couple of Necron parts across other areas. You will notice that on these models I have committed Games Workshop heresy by painting my orcs any colour other than green. But don't worry, while we're going to be looking through the next few models, what I will do is touch on the lore or headcanon of my army, and that will explain how they've got to where they are, giving me a completely justifiable and defendable position. As we start looking at the Weirdboy for this force, let's go over what the hell happened to this clan. On a small and unknown planet in a galaxy, there were two factions set against each other in a constantly renewing battle. On one side, we had the bloodthirsty orcs, driven by growth through fighting itself. And then on the other side, we had the undying legions of the Necrons. Leaving no corpse behind, the Necrons phase out of local space and return to their tombs, ready to rise and continue to fight. Then we can look at the Warboss for this clan, and this Warboss is made naturally using some Orc pieces and some Necron pieces, but we've also done a special, kind of a dirty conversion to be honest, where we've taken a Lord of the Rings troll and used that as the base formation and framework for the model, and then made adaptations to there, giving us a really nice presence on this Orc Warboss. The continual fighting of these forces prevented either side from leaving the planet, causing a never-ending cycle of destruction. It was into this situation that an inquisitorial fleet located the planet, in a small, obscure system with 4 other densely packed hive planets, recently requesting to rejoin the Imperium. Due to the assessed low risk of contamination spreading, the fleet took time to review and plan. With the leaders looked at, we can now jump across to the various knobs in the army. And this is where the annoyance and cost tends to come in. For example, our Mega Nobz were a combination between Mega Nobz as well as a box of Skorpekh Destroyers, and I really like how they came out. The disadvantage there is that we bought 2 boxes for a total of 6 models, and the outcome was a total of 3 models. So in a cost per model return from the box to the final tabletop, it's not the greatest portion of return. Jumping back to our tale, after decades of study, the unknown Inquisitor and his team believe they may have found a molecular weapon that would neutralize the Necron forces, severing their ability to phase shift on destruction. This would change the war against the filthy Xenos, allowing the Imperium as a whole to make great strides if it were to work. After consideration, the fleet launched missiles containing this molecular virus, believing that not only would this eliminate the threat of the Necron forces, but also turn the clans on the planet against each other as the vacuum of enemies pulls the orcs into inevitable combat. This plan partially worked. I think it's about at this time in the story we can start looking at the various miniatures that we've built for the army. And I will say that building the vehicles for this army is slightly more enjoyable in the budget sense than building up some of the other individual models. And that's because when we're building up, say, Nobz out of the Necron and the Orc kits, generally we're going to be ending up with 3 Nobz, but we're buying 2 kits of 3 to make that one unit. Whereas things like vehicles, generally we're going to have enough components to just split them down the middle and make a 50-50 case, which means 2 vehicles for the price of 2 vehicles, which in the case of this army is a good deal. The model that we're looking at now is the only one that doesn't meet the Necron and Ork merger for this army, and that's the Death Dread. And the only reason that is that we made this at a Warhammer Fest build and take, so we were limited on the model pieces that we had. Then we can jump back to the other vehicles using Ork and our Necron pieces. We can then look at our story as well, because as you know, in the creation of the Necrorks, we have just left off with the Inquisitorial fleet dropping virus bombs onto the planet. Shortly after the virus bombs hit the planet, the Inquisition fleet watched with keen interest, and to be honest, if they were a slightly cheerier lot, there may have even been cheers. Over the course of months, it became clear that the phasability of the Necrons on the planet was ceasing to function. Metal corpses started littering the battlefield, leaving behind crystallized energy, trapped by the phase shift inability and locking into a gem state. And then the Orks started making progress. But there was an unexpected development. The virus had a secondary impact, an impact that affected the fungal DNA of the Orks. This change seemed small and non-consequential at start, but as the battle raged on, new Orks grew, these having discoloured skin and non-orky thoughts. Finally, we can start looking at the vehicles, and the vehicles were slightly more cost effective. We're able to make a couple of different things, but one of the ones I wanted to start off with is my completely original X-Wing. Luckily, I had a couple spare sets of Dakajet wings from a previous project and was able to use that in combination with other parts to make this really unique and completely inspired design of an Ork X-Wing. At first, the Inquisition saw this as a good thing. The Orks were already fighting amongst themselves, the red against the green. But it was not long till the Red Orks either killed or tamed any of the original clans across the planet, taking out the Necrons with extreme speed and skill. But not only was it the strength of the Red Orks that had grown, but the intellect too. Behind cloaking fields created by the mechs, the Orks were able to build great ships from the remnants of the Necron technology. Dreams and insight of warnings told the Weirdboys about the Inquisition's quiet monitoring. The Inquisition only realised that anything was amiss when the cloak dropped, revealing over a quarter of the planet to be ships taking off with high speed and aggression. And from that point, the Inquisition fleet wasn't really heard from again. From the Imperium side, a note was added to the register that the fleet went out and that communication was lost after a few decades. There may have been a great secret that was worth retrieving, and a scout ship was sent to that system, but all they found was a collection of planets, drained, lifeless, just a husk. And that explains why I have Orks that are not green. So I don't want anyone moaning about the fact that my Orks aren't green, and within GW lore, they have to be green. I've made headcanon, I've made lore. It's completely justifiable. I am in a castle on a hill. You cannot assail me. But in real honesty, it's just quite a nice story. And that was the thing that came first. And then I built the army around it. Let me know, do you tend to paint an army because you like a theme and then build a story to support your army? Or do you start off with a rough or even a full story for your force and then build your army to match that narrative? I'd be really interested to know if you think there's a pro or a con to doing it either way. The advantage I can see is I came up with a nice story that I liked, and now I have an army that is on the way to growing in line with that story. So I think it's a really nice idea. And as I said, it makes me unassailable from the Green Ork crew. With that all said, you might be part of the Green Ork crew, and I am also a fan of Green Orks, as you'll see from this selection of videos where we paint up different Orks in different clans. Otherwise, you're going to need to remember to subscribe so that we can see you next time.